An elementary school student deliberately made a fake fire alarm call, but only because he wanted to see his father, who was a firefighter. But when his father arrived at the school, he took his father straight into the girls' bathroom. Then his father was shocked by what he saw. A 13-year-old girl was lying on the floor. Her belly was heavily swollen, and she was about to give birth.
Oh my God.
Well, Dad, can you help?
The two firefighters couldn't believe their eyes. This was definitely the youngest mother they had ever helped. The little girl was sweating from the pain, crying and begging the firefighters not to tell her mother. The firefighters did not agree right away. They first covered her with a blanket, then started checking her condition. They found that the baby was almost coming.
Now, Ava, I know you don't feel comfortable talking to your parents, but maybe there's a teacher or the principal.
That's the problem. Her mom is the principal.
The girl said that her mother was the principal, but she only cared about other children. Only when she got bad grades would her mother finally look at her. Because of this, her mother did not notice anything, even though she had been pregnant for 10 months.
Oh, gosh, Dad, no.
No, I have a boyfriend, but he isn't here today.
Boyfriend? Okay, oh, where is he?
Orthodontist, getting his braces off.
Right after she finished speaking, the girl suddenly screamed in pain. They had to help her give birth immediately. But without any equipment, how could they help the girl give birth? They told the girl to push harder, but she had never felt this kind of pain before, so she refused to cooperate. With no other choice, the firefighters started singing a children's song right there. This finally calmed the angry little girl down.
Me over and for me.
Along with the girl's painful scream, the baby was finally born, but the baby's body was covered by a thin layer. Even worse, the baby inside did not move at all.
God, did I kill it? Is my baby dead?
At that moment, the baby suddenly moved, still alive. They had to save the baby immediately. Without medical tools, they could only use their fingers to help. After a lot of effort, they finally tore open the thin layer around the baby. Then they found a straw to help clear the baby's mouth. Their efforts were not wasted. The baby opened its eyes and started crying loudly. The girl took the baby in her arms, but her face was full of worry. She did not know how to explain everything to her mother. However, the arrival of the ambulance still alerted the principal, and the scene in front of her left her completely stunned.
Don't be mad, Mommy. Please don't be mad.
Are you okay? Are you in pain?
Only at this moment, the principal realized how unqualified she had been as a mother. Luckily, her daughter was safe, and she still had a chance to properly make up for her daughter.
Hello? Is anyone in here? Seattle Fire Department!
Yes, help in here!
Following the voice, the paramedics pushed open another door. A man was lying on the floor with a metal lamp stand sticking straight through his chest. It turned out he was trying to install a ceiling light by himself to save the installation cost. But he slipped and fell. The metal stand came crashing down, piercing right through his body. The paramedics immediately started an IV to stabilize him, then used a saw to cut off the extra part of the metal stand. As they began dressing the wound, the man looked confused. Why was the metal rod still stuck in his chest? The paramedics explained that if they pulled it out now, he could bleed to death. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, he suddenly rolled his eyes back and passed out. The monitor showed his blood pressure dropping fast and his heart rate was racing. They immediately gave him norepinephrine to keep him stable. After a tense rescue, his vital signs finally returned to normal. The moment they loaded him into the ambulance, he opened his eyes.
Am I at the hospital?
Not yet, buddy, but we need to get you there right now.
He wondered why it had taken so long. Before he could finish speaking, he lost consciousness again. Just as they were about to leave, the monitor suddenly started blaring. His blood pressure dropped again, and he suddenly stopped breathing. They had no choice but to stop and begin another round of emergency treatment. After inserting a breathing tube, his condition finally stabilized once more. They rushed him into the ambulance and sped toward the hospital. The nearest hospital was only 6 minutes away. If he could survive those 6 minutes, they would make it. But halfway there, his heart suddenly went into ventricular fibrillation.
Are you kidding me, Nate?
They quickly attached the defibrillator pads and delivered shock after shock. Even after 4 rounds of defibrillation, nothing changed. With no other choice, they pulled over and started 2-person CPR. But the longer they performed CPR, the worse his condition became. Every chest compression forced more blood out through the wound in his chest, bringing him closer to death. Then they made a bold decision: pull the metal rod out. It could cause massive bleeding, but it was their only chance to save him.
Whatever you do not stop compressions.
One paramedic carefully pulled out the metal rod. Blood immediately poured out of the wound. He packed the wound with gauze, layer after layer, while pressing down as hard as he could. Second by second, they waited. A miracle happened. The bleeding finally stopped, and his heartbeat returned to normal. They had done it. The ambulance set off again. Thankfully, during the remaining 3-minute drive, nothing else went wrong. They finally arrived safely at the hospital. The moment they handed the man over to the doctors, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The man was trapped after a car crash. But when the firefighters arrived, they didn't rush to pull him out. Instead, they told him to jump out of the car like a rabbit, or he wouldn't survive.
Like a bunny! I can't.
Yes, you can. You can do this. I know you can.
I don't
The man was confused. Why couldn't he just get out of the car normally? Moments earlier, he had crashed straight into a utility pole. A broken high-voltage power line was sparking and whipping across the ground. The live wire had trapped him inside his car.
Help me, please! Help!
The man kept crying for help, but the firefighters couldn't get close. The entire area was energized by the high-voltage electricity. All they could do was wait for the power company to shut off the power. For now, they used long insulated poles to move the power line away from the car. But the man couldn't wait any longer. He wanted to get out.
Take that chance, okay? And I'm sure it sounds strange, but right now, your car's rubber tires are the only thing preventing you from getting shocked. So, please, no matter what, stay in there.
Then another deadly problem appeared. The car was leaking gasoline. If a spark ignited the fuel, he would be doomed. The firefighters quickly covered the gasoline with sand. Then they shouted for the man to open the door and jump out. Now he was even more confused. A moment ago, they told him not to leave the car. Now they wanted him to get out immediately. But to stay alive, he had no choice but to listen.
Make sure both feet hit the ground at the same time. You're gonna hop off like a bunny.
A bunny?
Because electricity travels through the body, keeping both feet together prevents creating a path for the current to flow into the ground. It sounded complicated, but doing it was not easy at all.
1, 2, 3.
Nice!
Nice. Very good.
His first jump went perfectly. He even looked a little proud. The next few jumps also went smoothly, but just before the last jump, disaster struck.
Push off! Push off! No, you can't. Not till the power's off.
A powerful electric shock threw him to the ground. Smoke rose from the bottom of his shoes, and he lay there, unconscious. The cruel part was, just 10 seconds after he collapsed, the power company finally shut off the electricity. The firefighters rushed over to save him, but it was already too late. There were almost no visible injuries, yet the damage inside his body was beyond saving. The man seemed to realize what was happening. Before he died, he only wanted to hear his wife's voice one last time. Unaware of the tragedy, his pregnant wife smiled and told him that their baby was kicking again. Her face was full of happiness as she dreamed about their future as a family of 3, never knowing that the man she loved would never return home.
I love you.
Okay.
Say it back.
Everything all right?
Please, Lynn.
I love you.
The man still had so much he wanted to say, but he never got another chance. Luckily, the truck driver turned in time. They were able to survive.
Here, it's still in one piece? That was ridiculous.
Who would have thought that a tiny hole on the road, only the size of a palm, could get her leg stuck? They were about to pull the woman out, but the captain told them not to rush. They needed to put on safety ropes first.
Or a pothole. That could turn into a sinkhole.
Although the team members thought it was a little unnecessary, they still followed the order. After everything was ready, they held the woman and tried to pull her up, but she suddenly screamed in pain, so the firefighters immediately stopped. The edge of the hole was rough. If they forced her out, her thigh could be badly scraped and injured. It seemed like the only way was to dig the hole wider. The firefighters took out their tools and started digging. A teammate came over and reminded them to be careful, or her leg could be seriously damaged.
Did you just say lose my leg? Is that true?
He thought he had said it quietly, but the sharp-eared woman still heard him. The firefighters had no choice but to reassure her again and again. They promised they would be extremely careful to make sure she was safe. Seeing the woman close to breaking down, a firefighter quickly started talking with her to distract her. At that moment, the girl she had feelings for suddenly ran out from the crowd.
My God, Piper, what happened? Are you okay?
She felt extremely embarrassed, thinking she had completely lost face. But after learning about her feelings, her friend suddenly kissed her. While the two were showing their love, the firefighters finally finished digging the hole. They held the woman tightly and pulled her out with all their strength. Although the injuries on her leg caused her unbearable pain, her face was filled with happiness. After all, the person she liked happened to like her too. What could be sweeter than that?